So some people have questioned whether or not I'm actually a gunsmith. And so I just wanted to respond to that by showing you guys a project that I'm working on. You see, this is the latest in Transylvania PCC. You can tell because it was made in Slovakia. And the problem is that normally when you thread something, right, you thread it the length of the diameter. But not in gun stuff. You don't do it there, right? You thread it shorter. And if you look at this, you see, hey, look, like the Transylvanians didn't get the message. So there's a gap here. So we're going to make a spacer, right? And we're going to try to make it relatively, it's going to try to look nice with this and you know, be about the same diameter as this piston here. So when I mount a tri-lug, it looks relatively, you know, seamless. And God asked me to make one for him because he's helpless and can't do anything for himself. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can make one. So the outside diameter that we're going to use is going to be based off the barrel. And in order to measure that, we use a piece of equipment called a micrometer. And these can be difficult to read if you aren't familiar with them. This is not a digital one. This is an analog micrometer. So if you look at this, right, you can see it reads approximately 12 inches. So that's the OD that we're looking for, is approximately 12 inches. The stock we're going to use for this project is 0.940 in diameter, and it is a stock of 12L14. The 12L14 basically means that it contains lead. And so that makes it free machining steel, which is much easier to deal with, especially when you're dealing with equipment that is, you know, maybe a little less than precise. It also has the benefit of giving God lead poisoning, which I'm entirely in favor. The stock is chucked up in the lathe. When you take the numbers into consideration, so the stock diameter, the nominal exterior diameter of stock is approximately 0.94000. And what we're shooting for an OD is 0.7384, okay? And that leaves us with, if I do the math correctly, it's 0.2014 that needs to be taken out in total of this. Now you have to remember, you're cutting from both sides at the same time. So when you're using this hand wheel, it does not account for that. So what we're looking to remove from here is 0.1007 of an inch, and that will give us our exterior diameter. And that's our first step. We'll be using this contraption that is 3D printed to measure, you know, how far we're cutting. That's not a critical dimension at this point. We'll be cutting it to a critical dimension later, but right now we're just going to do this initial pass. And then we'll use that to get a general feel for like how thick we want the spacer later. But right now we're just gonna square the end off and then we're gonna turn it down. So we now have like our first pass done. The end is cleaned up and I took a shot off here. So now I can measure this, see how far I have to come down, and use that to calculate a more precise version of what I just told you before. Before that was a gross estimation because this thing is not entirely running true. It should be running true on the machine now. So I'm going to use this measurement that I'm going to take here with the micrometer and then use that as my final dimensions, and then use the hand wheel to see whether or not I'm hitting that. And I'll measure a couple times as I cut to see if I'm getting close or not. Again, all of this is theoretically not that critical. It's all cosmetic. The important thing is that the front and the back are in line with each other so that you don't end up throwing the suppressor off with that spacer if it tightens down on it. But it would be nice if I got it relatively close so that things looked good. So if I fuck up the part initially, that one will go to God, and then the good one I'll keep. So we're closing in on the target outer diameter that we're looking for. And the outer diameter right now is 0.776. Which is fantastic because that's a very patriotic number. And the other thing to keep in mind when you're working with a lathe, a very key safety tip is if you have a drink, don't put it down here because you'll get metal chips in it. And then you'll shit blood for a fucking week. Trust me, it's not any fun. So make sure to keep your drink like away from the chip area. That's not a good place. So here we are at final OD. It turned out pretty well. Mostly because I kept all the chips out of my drink, so I won't be pooping blood, but also because this is is very close to the exterior diameter of the gun that we're working on over there. So now that the outside is done, we need to go ahead and drill an inside, right? And we're going to do that using a tailstock. I'm going to put a bit in there. We're going to start small and drill it out to 1/2 inch because it's the biggest metal drill that I have. Then we're going to finish off the interior diameter with something called a boring bar, which I have to modify to fit. And then we'll go from there. When drilling, even outside of a lathe or with a hand drill or a drill press or whatever, there's a lot to know, right? And a lot of people don't understand this, so I'm gonna explain it. The bigger your bit you are using, like the slower the RPM that you should use. And like you might ask me, like when this specific situation, where we have this stock in here and we have this size bit, what is the proper RPM? And the good news that I have for you is I have no fucking idea. But the other good news I know is that the tool manufacturer that makes this is very high quality, so I should have some leeway. It's an Asian manufacturer by the name of Harbor Freight. So regardless of what speeds I choose, this should work stupendously. So here we are with the final hole. This is the biggest drill that I have. And so from here, I got to switch to the boring bar. Not gonna lie, it was like touch and go. I think I got some of this, the speeds wrong, but I used the same tactic I used at your mom's house, which is I went slow, I used lots of lube, and I listened for the scream. And that seemed to work pretty well. So at this point, I've come in with this boring bar, and I've gotten it to like 1/1000 or 2/1000 over the exterior diameter of the threads that I want to put this over. So that's very good. Definitely well within tolerances for something like this. So now the next challenge becomes, how do we cut this thing off? And then I have to come back in and I have to square up the other end, because if I use a cutoff blade, it's not going to be square, right? So this is the tool that you would traditionally use. It's called a parting blade. You stick this on here, you turn this very slow, and you part this off. Then you have to flip it around in the jaws, and you have to square up the other end. And that will make sure that this end and that end are square with each other, so that way if you thread a suppressor on there, you won't end up with anything going kittywampus in a baffle strike. So that's kind of what we're doing here. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to try to part this thing off as best as I can. I'm also going to clean up the interior and exterior of these, just try to make them a little nicer. And we'll go from there. So here I've cut off the first one already with a parting blade, and I'm going to cut the second one off. Now this is one of those things where it's, if you're going to make two of something, it turns out it's not twice as hard as making one. It's trivially easy. You just have to make the part long enough where you can cut two of the parts off. So, you know, it's not a lot of extra work to make something for God. And this way, if I fuck one up, right, I have a spare to use. And then God can have the fucked up one. So, all right, so here's the finished product. We have the suppressor here. We have the part that I made here. So I mean, from a barrel profile perspective, and a suppressor profile, boy, that's pretty gosh darn good. You can barely feel it with your fingernail. It looks really good. Finished in Oxbow blue because that's what I have available and it works quick. I got two usable parts out of this. However, one is a little thicker than the other because I didn't take into account the width of the parting blade when I was doing my measurements. So this is the thinner of the two, but both are totally usable parts. I'm going to count this a success considering I'd never used a boring bar before. But yeah, should be great.